Chosen one, before I tell you what silenced them, I need you to understand something. What you are about to hear is going to explain every enemy that went quiet, every critic that stopped talking, every person who had so much to say about you that suddenly had nothing. But I am not going to tell you yet. Keep watching, because most people will turn this off before they get to the part that changes everything. Do not be most people. Stay until the end, because what God is about to reveal about what you did and why it silenced every single one of them is the most important thing you will hear today. They were loud once. They had opinions about everything, about your choices, about your future, about your relationships, about your dreams, about your failures, about the version of yourself you are still becoming. They spoke freely in rooms you were never invited to people you trusted, to anyone who would listen. Your name was in their mouths constantly, and none of what they said was building you. They questioned your decisions, challenged your direction, doubted your gifts, minimized your wins, amplified your losses, and did all of it with a confidence that told you they were certain you would never be able to prove them wrong. They were comfortable in their conclusions, settled in their judgment, sure of their position about who you were and where you were going, which was nowhere according to them. And then you did something, and everything changed. What you did not do first. You did not argue with them. You did not expose them publicly. You did not lower yourself to the level of the conversation they were having about you. You did not seek revenge. You did not plot. You did not wait for their downfall. You did not even respond to most of what was being said. And that restraint, that silence, that refusal to engage was actually the first thing that confused them. Because they expected a reaction. They needed a reaction, because a reaction would have confirmed that their words had power over you, that you were still operating from the place of needing their approval, their understanding, their acceptance. But you gave them nothing. And that nothing made them louder temporarily, because silence from you made them nervous without knowing why. What you actually did, you decided one ordinary day, in one quiet moment that had no fanfare, no announcement, no audience. You decided that who God said you were was more true than everything they had been saying. You decided that your assignment was more important than their opinion of it. You decided that the version of yourself God was building was worth more than the version they wanted you to keep in. You decided to stop performing for people who were never going to applaud, no matter how good the performance was, and you started living for an audience of one, God, and only God. That decision, that single internal shift, was what changed everything. Not a dramatic moment, not a public declaration, not a confrontation that put them in their place, just a quiet, firm, unshakable decision that who God said you were was enough, and everything moved from there. What happened after that decision? You stopped shrinking, not overnight, but gradually. Then suddenly, the version of yourself you had been compressing to fit into spaces that were too small started expanding back to its God-intended size. You started moving differently, with a purpose in your step that had not been there before, with a direction that did not require their validation to feel legitimate. You started occupying space in rooms they said you did not belong in, not loudly, not arrogantly, just naturally. The way someone moves when they know exactly why they are there and who sent them. You started building, quietly, consistently, without announcing what you were building, without asking for their approval of the blueprint, without stopping when they questioned whether what you were building would ever amount to anything. You just kept building, day after day, in the quiet, in the private, in the space between who they said you were and who God was revealing you to be. When the silence began, it did not happen all at once. First, one went quiet, the one who had been loudest, who had the most to say, who was most certain in their judgment, went silent first, because they saw something that contradicted everything they had concluded. They did not say anything about what they saw, they just went quiet. And others noticed and started watching more carefully, and then they saw it too. The elevation that had no natural explanation, the favor that did not make sense given what they thought they knew about you, the doors opening for someone they were certain had no business being in those rooms, the peace on your face in circumstances that should have broken you, the joy that existed independent of their opinions of whether you deserved it. One by one, the mouths closed, the conversations stopped, the opinions dried up, not because they had a change of heart necessarily, because they had a change of evidence. And the evidence, your life, your elevation, your undeniable transformation, left no room for the old conclusions to survive.
Why your silence specifically shocked them. They expected noise from you, retaliation, defense, explanation, proof that their words had landed, proof that you were still playing the game by their rules. But you never gave them that proof. You just kept moving. And silence from someone who has every reason to be loud is more powerful than any argument could ever be. Your silence said, I do not need to defend what God is building. I do not need to explain what God ordained. I do not need your understanding to walk in what He assigned. And that message, delivered through your silence, through your continued movement, through your refusal to be derailed by what they were saying, landed louder than anything you could have said in response. What God did while they were talking, while they were busy discussing your limitations, God was busy dismantling them. While they were measuring your ceiling, God was removing it entirely. While they were predicting your failure, God was engineering your elevation. While they were certain of what you could not do, God was positioning you to do exactly that and more. He was not distracted by their noise. He was not deterred by their conclusions. He was not waiting for their permission to fulfill what He already promised. He just kept working on your behalf, in the hidden place, building what they did not believe was possible for someone like you. And when it surfaced, when what He built in secret came into the open, their conclusion about who you were and what you were capable of collapsed completely under the weight of undeniable evidence that they were wrong and God was right. What their silence means for you, it is not the goal. Let that be clear. Their silence was never what you were working toward. Your purpose was always to walk in what God assigned. And their silence is simply a byproduct of you doing exactly that. So do not let their silence become your new motivation. Do not start living for the moment they go quiet, instead of living for the God who called you. Their silence is a sign that you are on the right path, not the destination. The destination is fulfilling the assignment, becoming who God made you, impacting the lives you were sent to impact, leaving the legacy that was written before you were born. Their silence just confirms that you are moving correctly in that direction. Keep moving, with or without it. What you must never do now that they are silent. Do not go back to seek their validation. The silence is not an invitation to return to their world, looking for the acknowledgement you no longer need. Do not become arrogant in the silence, because what God built in you during the season they were speaking was humility. And humility is what makes the elevation sustainable. Lose the humility and the foundation shifts.
Do not stop moving because they stopped talking. Their silence is not the finish line. It is a milestone, and there are more miles ahead. Stay focused, stay grounded, stay faithful in the assignment that produced the silence in the first place. A word for the ones still in the loud season. They're still talking about you, still questioning, still doubting, still having the conversations about your limitations in rooms you are not invited to. And it still hurts. This message is for you. Your silent season is coming, the season where the mouths close, where the conversations stop, where the evidence of your life becomes too loud for their words to compete with. It is coming. But between here and there is the decision, the same decision that every chosen one who silenced their critics had to make, to stop living for their approval and start living for God's assignment. Make that decision today, not when it stops hurting, now, while it still costs something. Because decisions that cost something produce something, and what that decision produces is exactly what eventually silences everyone who ever had something to say about who you are and what you are capable of.
Final word. They all fell silent after you did something that had nothing to do with them. You decided that God's opinion of you was the only one that mattered. You moved from that decision consistently, faithfully, without announcement, without audience, and your life did the talking that your mouth never needed to do. And one by one, every voice that was loud about your limitations went quiet in the face of a God who had no interest in being limited by what they concluded about someone he chose before they had a single opinion. That is what silenced them. Not your cleverness, not your strategy, not your retaliation. Your decision to believe what God said more than what they said, and to live from that belief every single day until the evidence was undeniable and they had nothing left to say. Keep living that way and watch who else goes silent in the face of a life fully surrendered to God. In the comments, write, "My life speaks louder than their words ever did," or the number 777, or "God silenced every voice that spoke against me." Subscribe and stay close. Chosen one. They fell silent because you finally stopped listening to them and started listening to God. And when you listen to God and move accordingly, even your loudest critics eventually have nothing left to say. Amen. What the silence revealed about them. When people go quiet, after years of being loud about you, something is exposed about why they were loud in the first place. Their noise was never really about you. It was about them. About what your potential reminded them of. About what your refusal to stay small said about their choice to stay comfortable. About what your faith challenged in their unbelief. About what your movement exposed in their stagnation. They were loud because loud felt like control. As long as they were defining you with their words, they felt like they had power over your story, over your direction, over the version of yourself you were allowed to become. But the moment you stopped being defined by what they said, the moment you stepped outside the story they were writing for you, their power dissolved, and all that was left was silence. And in that silence, the truth about them became visible. That they were never qualified to speak over your life in the way they did. That their conclusions about you were always more about their fears than your reality. That the loudness was a performance for an audience that included themselves. And now that the performance has nothing to play against, it has nowhere to go. And the curtain came down on everything they built
with their words about you. What God recorded during the loud season. Every word they said, God heard. Every conversation they had about you, in rooms you were never invited to, God was in those rooms. Every judgment they made, every limitation they declared, every time they spoke your name with doubt attached to it, God recorded it. Not to hold it against them forever, but because God keeps accounts, and what was spoken against His chosen one, without cause, without truth, without the authority they assumed they had, was logged. And God addresses what was logged, in His time, in His way. Not always with punishment, sometimes with something more powerful. Evidence. The undeniable, visible, public evidence that everything they said was wrong. That is God's response to every word spoken against you. Not retaliation, vindication through your elevation. That makes their words look exactly like what they were. Noise. From people who did not know what God knew about who you were and what you were capable of.
The people who are watching from a distance. Not everyone who went silent was an enemy. Some of them were people who cared about you, but got caught up in the narrative that was being built around your name, who heard things and believed them without coming to you directly, who distanced themselves not out of malice, out of confusion about who you actually were versus who they were being told you were. And those people, the ones who watched from a distance, have been watching your elevation with a very different feeling than your enemies. They have been watching with something closer to regret, a quiet grief for the closeness they forfeited by believing a version of you that was never real. Some of them will reach out in this season, awkwardly, without fully explaining why, but reaching out because something in them knows that what they stepped away from was something real, something worth returning to, if you will have them. Be discerning about who you let back in, not bitter, discerning. Some of those reconnections are God-ordained, bringing back relationships that were stolen by lies and restoring them better than they were before. Others are the enemy, trying to use familiar faces to regain access to what he lost when you elevated beyond his reach. Ask God about each one and trust what he shows you. What this season of silence is producing in your legacy, your story is being written right now. Not just for you, for the people who come after you, who will look back at this season and see something powerful. Someone who was spoken against by many and chose to move anyway. Someone who was doubted by the people closest to them and chose to believe God anyway. Someone who had every reason to become bitter, defensive, closed, and chose to remain open, remain faithful, remain focused on the assignment rather than the opposition. That story, the one being written in this season, will outlast you, will inspire people you will never meet, will give permission to chosen ones who come after you to also refuse to be defined by what people say when what God said is louder and more true and more powerful than any human conclusion could ever be. Your silence in the face of their noise, your elevation in the face of their doubt, your peace in the face of their chaos is a legacy being written one faithful day at a time. And it will echo long after this season is a distant memory.
What happens next in your story? The silence is just the beginning. What comes after the silence is something even more significant, because silence creates a vacuum, and vacuums get filled. The vacuum left by the people who used to speak against you is being filled with new voices. Voices that speak differently about you, that speak what God says about you, that celebrate what He placed in you,
that call you higher rather than holding you back. And those new voices will carry more weight in your next season than all the old noise combined. Because God is strategic about what fills the space that the silencing creates. He does not just remove the wrong voices, He sends the right ones. And the right voices are coming into your life in this season to speak over what God is building in a way that confirms, encourages, and accelerates everything He has planned for the version of you that survived being spoken against and came out still standing, still faithful, still chosen, still on assignment, ready for everything that the silence just made room for. Final word. They all fell silent after you did something that had nothing to do with them. You decided that God's opinion of you was the only one that mattered. You moved from that decision consistently, faithfully, without announcement, without audience, and your life did the talking that your mouth never needed to do. And one by one, every voice that was loud about your limitations went quiet in the face of a God who had no interest in being limited by what they concluded about someone He chose before they had a single opinion. That is what silenced them. Not your cleverness, not your strategy, not your retaliation. Your decision to believe what God said more than what they said, and to live from that belief every single day until the evidence was undeniable and they had nothing left to say. Keep living that way and watch who else goes silent in the face of a life fully surrendered to God. In the comments write, "My life speaks louder than their words ever did," or the number 777, or God silenced every voice that spoke against me. Subscribe and stay close. Chosen one, they fell silent because you finally stopped listening to them and started listening to God. And when you listen to God and move accordingly, even your loudest critics eventually have nothing left to say. Amen.